A Kato warrior found a stranger repairing his broken wagon in the middle of a lightning storm. Soaked to the bone and trembling with cold, but when he discovered the nest of blankets hidden beneath the canvas, he realized she had been living there in secret for weeks. Northern California Territory, late autumn 1878. The sky broke open like a wound, pouring rain across the valley in thick, relentless sheets that turned the earth to mud and the air to mist. Thunder rolled through the mountains, shaking the pines, and lightning split the clouds with jagged white light that made the world flicker between darkness and blinding clarity. Miko rode his paint stallion along the ridge above his camp, his long black hair plastered to his shoulders, his buckskin shirt heavy with water. He'd been tracking deer since dawn, moving through the forest with the patience his father had taught him. But the storm had driven the animals into hiding, and now he was returning empty-handed, frustrated, and cold. The Kato land stretched wide and wild around him, untouched by the settlers who carved up the valleys to the south. His people had held this territory for generations, living in balance with the forest, the rivers, the seasons. But that balance was shifting now. The world was changing, and Miko felt it in his bones like the ache before a storm. He was a man alone by choice. His family had moved west 2 summers ago, following the elk herds and seeking distance from the encroaching towns. But Miko had stayed behind, tending the land his grandfather had walked, keeping the old ways alive even as the new ones pressed closer with every passing year. His camp sat in a clearing near the river, a simple structure of wood and hide, a fire pit surrounded by stones, a rack for drying meat, and his wagon, an old freight wagon he had traded for 5 years ago. Sturdy oak and iron, with a canvas cover stretched over bent wooden ribs. He used it to haul supplies when he traveled to the trading post, to carry game when the hunting was good, to store tools and furs and the few possessions he kept. As he approached the clearing, he saw movement near the wagon. A figure, small and hunched, crouched beside the rear wheel. Miko pulled his horse to a stop, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. His eyes narrowing against the rain. The figure was a woman, her back to him, her hair a dark tangle hanging down her spine, soaked through and clinging to her thin frame. She wore a dress that might have been blue once, but was now faded to the color of old smoke. Torn at the hem and streaked with mud, her hands worked quickly, desperately, tying a strip of leather around the wheel hub where the iron rim had come loose. Miko dismounted silently, his boots making no sound in the wet grass. He moved closer, watching her. She did not seem to notice him, too focused on her task, her fingers fumbling with the knot, shaking from cold or fear or both. "That is not your wagon," he said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the sound of the rain. The woman gasped and spun around, falling backward onto the mud, her eyes wide and startled, green like new leaves, set in a face that was pale and gaunt, shadowed with exhaustion. She stared up at him, breathing hard, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then she scrambled to her feet, wiping mud from her palms. Her chin lifted in defiance despite the fear he could see trembling at the edges of her mouth. "I know," she said, her voice hoarse and raw. "I was fixing it." Miko studied her, taking in the hollow of her cheeks, the way her dress hung loose on her frame, the bruises on her wrists that looked old and faded. "Why?" he asked simply. She hesitated, glancing back at the wagon, then at him. "Because it was broken," she said, as if that explained everything. "You fix what does not belong to you," he said. It was not a question. "I fix what needs fixing," she replied, her voice steadier now, "whether it belongs to me or not." Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the clearing in stark white light. And in that brief moment, Miko saw her fully. The determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the way she stood despite the cold and the rain and the obvious exhaustion pulling at her limbs. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ilara," she said, Ilara Moss. Where do you come from? Ilara Moss, he asked, his tone neutral. Neither welcoming nor hostile, she looked away, toward the dark line of trees beyond the clearing. Nowhere that matters anymore, she said quietly. Miko nodded slowly. He understood that kind of answer. The kind that carried weight without details. The kind that spoke of leaving rather than arriving. You have been here before, he said. It was not a question, he could see it now. The way she stood too comfortably near his wagon. The way her eyes had darted to the canvas cover when he first spoke. Ilara's shoulders stiffened. But she did not deny it. Yes, she said simply. How long? He asked. She bit her lip. Then met his gaze directly. 3 weeks, she admitted. Her voice barely audible over the rain. Maybe 4, I lost count. Miko felt something shift in his chest, surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. He had been here every few days, checking his traps, gathering wood, tending his camp, and he had never seen her. Never noticed any signs of intrusion. You have been sleeping in my wagon, he said. Yes, she said, lifting her chin again. I did not take anything. I did not damage anything. I even fixed the axle that was cracking. And the tear in the canvas, and now the wheel. Why? He asked again. Because I had nowhere else to go, she said, her voice breaking slightly on the last word. And because your wagon was the only shelter I could find that did not belong to someone who would hurt me. The words hung between them, heavy and sharp. Miko watched her carefully, noting the way her hands had curled into fists at her sides. The way her breathing had quickened, not from exertion but from something deeper. Something that lived in her bones. Who hurt you? He asked quietly. Ilara shook her head. It does not matter, she said. They are gone now, or I am. It is the same thing. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time, and the rain intensified, pouring down in torrents that turned the clearing into a shallow stream. Miko glanced at his shelter, then back at Ilara, who was shivering violently now, her arms wrapped around herself. Come, he said, turning toward his lodge. What? She asked, confused. You will freeze out here, he said without looking back. Come inside. I can leave, she said quickly. I will go. I did not mean to cause trouble. Miko stopped and turned to face her, the rain streaming down his face. If I wanted you gone, you would be gone, he said flatly. But I do not leave people to die in storms. Even strangers who sleep in my wagon. Ilara stared at him, uncertainty flickering across her face. Then slowly, carefully, she nodded and followed him toward the shelter. Inside, the space was warm and dry. A fire burned in the center pit, the smoke rising through the opening in the roof. Furs and woven mats covered the ground, and wooden storage boxes lined the walls. It smelled of sage and wood smoke and something earthy that Ilara could not name. Miko gestured to a spot near the fire. Sit, he said. She sat, her wet dress clinging to her skin, her hair dripping onto the mat beneath her. Miko pulled a heavy blanket from one of the boxes and held it out to her without a word. Ilara took it slowly, wrapping it around her shoulders, the warmth of it almost painful against her frozen skin. Thank you, she whispered. Miko nodded and moved to the other side of the fire. He poured water from a clay jug into a small pot and set it over the flames, then added dried herbs and roots from a leather pouch. The smell of cedar and mint began to fill the air. They sat in silence for a long time. The only sounds the crackling of the fire and the steady drum of rain on the hide roof. Ilara watched him through the steam rising from the pot. This man who had found her trespassing, who should have been angry or suspicious, but instead had brought her inside. Why did you not send me away? She asked finally. Miko looked up, his dark eyes steady and unreadable. Because you fixed my wagon, he said simply. That is not a reason, she said. It is reason enough, he replied. He lifted the pot from the fire and poured the steaming liquid into 2 wooden cups. He handed one to her. "Drink, it will warm you." Alara took the cup. Inhaling the fragrant steam, she sipped carefully, the heat spreading through her chest and belly, loosening the tight knot of cold that had settled there. "This is good," she said softly. "My grandmother's recipe," Miko said. "She said it could warm a man through the coldest winter." "She was right," Alara said. Taking another sip, they fell silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Less wary, less sharp. Alara felt her eyelids growing heavy, the warmth of the fire and the blanket and the tea pulling her towards sleep. "You can stay tonight," Miko said, his voice quiet. "Tomorrow we will talk." Alara looked at him, searching his face for deception or cruelty, but found neither. Only a calm steadiness that made something inside her chest unclench slightly. "Thank you," she said again. Miko nodded and rose, moving to the far side of the shelter where another pile of furs lay. He settled there, his back to her, giving her privacy and space. Alara lay down near the fire, pulling the blanket tight around herself. She watched the flames dance and flicker, listened to the rain outside, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to safe. When she woke in the gray light of dawn, the storm had passed. The fire had burned down to embers, and Miko was gone. But a piece of dried meat and a small pile of berries had been left on a wooden plate beside her, and the blanket had been tucked more carefully around her shoulders. She sat up slowly, looking around the empty shelter, then toward the open doorway where pale sunlight filtered through the trees. She could hear the river running high and fast from the rain, and somewhere in the distance, the call of a hawk. Alara stood and folded the blanket carefully, placing it back where Miko had taken it from. She ate the food he had left, savoring each bite, then stepped outside into the cool morning air. The clearing was transformed, the mud already drying in patches, the grass glistening with droplets, and the wagon, her secret home for weeks, sat solid and repaired in the sunlight. She walked toward it slowly, running her hand along the wooden side, remembering the nights she had curled beneath the canvas, listening to the sounds of the forest, trying to convince herself she was not alone. "You did good work," a voice said behind her. Alara turned to find Miko standing at the edge of the clearing, a string of fish in one hand, his expression unreadable. "I did what I could," she said. He nodded and walked past her toward the fire pit, where he began to prepare the fish for cooking. Alara watched him for a moment, then moved to help, taking a knife from her boot and cleaning the fish with practiced efficiency. Miko glanced at her hands, noting the skill. "You have done this before," he said. "My father was a trapper," she said. "Before he died." "And your mother?" Miko asked. "Gone," Alara said simply, her hands never pausing in their work. They cooked the fish in silence, and when it was ready, they ate sitting side by side on a log near the fire, the morning sun climbing higher, warming the air. "You said we would talk today," Alara said after a while. "Yes," Miko said, setting down his plate. "About what?" she asked. "About why you stay," he said, turning to look at her directly. "And what happens next?" Alara met his gaze, her heart beating faster. "I do not know what happens next," she admitted. "Then we will figure it out," Miko said, and in that moment, with the sun on her face and food in her belly, and a man beside her who had not yet asked her to leave, Alara felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The days that followed moved with a rhythm Alara had forgotten existed. A rhythm of purpose and routine that did not demand she hide or run or apologize for breathing. Miko rose before dawn each morning, tending the fire, checking his traps, and she rose with him. Not because he asked, but because sleeping past sunrise felt like wasting the gift of shelter he had given her. On the third morning, she found him sharpening a blade near the woodpile. The scrape of stone against metal, a steady sound in the quiet air. She approached with a bundle of kindling she had gathered from the forest edge, dropping it beside the growing stack he had been building. "You do not need to do that," he said without looking up. "I know," Ilara replied, brushing bark from her sleeves. "But your wood supply is low, winter is coming. And I am not going to sit idle while you work." Miko paused, glancing at her briefly, then returned to his blade. "You are stubborn," he observed. "I have been called worse," she said. A faint smile crossed his face. So quick she almost missed it. "I believe that," he said. She sat on a stump nearby, watching him work. His hands moved with precision, each stroke of the stone deliberate and controlled. There was something calming about it, the focus, the steady repetition. It reminded her of her father sharpening his skinning knives by lamplight, while her mother hummed old songs in the next room. "Where did you learn to track?" she asked suddenly. Miko looked up, surprised by the question. "My father," he said. "And his father before him. It is how we survive. How we have always survived. And you stayed here when your family left," Ilara said. It was not a question, he had mentioned it briefly before. But she wanted to understand. "Yes," he said simply. "Why?" she pressed. He set the blade down and looked toward the mountains, visible in the distance through the break in the trees. "Because someone must remember," he said quietly. "This land these ways, if I leave, if we all leave. Then the forgetting begins, and once it begins, it does not stop." Ilara nodded slowly, understanding more than he had said. "You carry a lot alone," she observed. "So do you," Miko replied, his eyes meeting hers with a directness that made her breath catch. She looked away, uncomfortable with being seen so clearly. "I carry what I must," she said. "As do I," he said, and returned to his sharpening. That afternoon, Ilara walked to the river to wash the clothes she had been wearing for weeks, the fabric stiff with dried sweat and dirt. She knelt on the smooth stones at the water's edge, scrubbing the cloth against itself. Watching the murky water carry away layers of grime, Miko appeared upstream. Leading his horse to drink, he did not speak, only nodded in acknowledgement before tending to the animal. Ilara continued her work, aware of his presence, but not troubled by it. There was something easy about the silence between them now, less guarded than it had been when she finished and hung the dress over a low branch to dry. She realized she had nothing else to wear. She stood there in her thin undergarments, debating whether to sit and wait or walk back to camp half-dressed. Miko approached, carrying a folded bundle. He held it out without meeting her eyes. "These belong to my sister," he said. "She left them when she moved west. They should fit." Ilara took the bundle carefully, unfolding it to reveal a simple tunic and leggings made of soft deerskin, decorated with small beads along the seams. "I cannot take these," she said. "They are sitting in a box doing nothing," Miko said, already turning away. "Better they are used." "Thank you," she called after him. He raised a hand in acknowledgement, but did not turn back. Ilara dressed quickly, the deerskin warm and comfortable against her skin, far more practical than her torn dress had ever been. She ran her fingers over the beadwork, marveling at the craftsmanship, and felt a pang of gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. When she returned to camp, Miko was gutting a rabbit he had snared, his hands quick and efficient. She sat across from him and began preparing vegetables she had found growing wild near the river, cutting them into even pieces without needing to be told what to do. "You know plants," Miko observed. "My mother taught me," Ilara said. "Which ones heal, which ones kill, which ones fill your belly when there is nothing else. Useful knowledge," he said. "It kept me alive," she replied. They cooked together, the rabbit roasting over the fire while the vegetables simmered in a clay pot with water and herbs. The smell made Ilara's stomach growl audibly, and Miko glanced at her with what might have been amusement. "When did you last eat a full meal?" he asked. "Before I started sleeping in your wagon," she admitted. He said nothing, but when the food was ready, he filled her bowl first, giving her the larger portion. She ate slowly, trying not to seem desperate. But the hunger was a living thing inside her. Clawing and demanding, Miko watched her quietly, then filled his own bowl and ate in silence. That night, as the fire burned low, Ilara sat braiding strips of leather she had found in Miko's supply box, her fingers working automatically while her mind wandered. Miko sat across from her, carving a piece of wood with his newly sharpened blade. Thin curls of pale wood falling to the ground at his feet. "What are you making?" she asked. "A bowl," he said. "The last one cracked." "Can I see?" she asked. He held it out, and she took it carefully, running her fingers over the smooth surface, feeling the grain of the wood. "It is beautiful," she said. "It is functional," he corrected, taking it back. "Both can be true," she said. He paused, considering this, then nodded once. "Yes," he agreed. "Both can be true." The next morning brought rain again. Not the violent storm of days before, but a steady drizzle that turned the world gray and soft. Ilara stood at the entrance of the shelter, watching the drops fall, feeling restless and confined. "There's work to be done," Miko said from behind her. She turned to find him pulling on a heavy hide cloak. "What kind of work?" she asked. "The kind that does not wait for sunshine," he said, handing her a second cloak, smaller and worn, but still serviceable. They walked together through the wet forest, following a narrow trail that wound between the trees. Miko moved with purpose, checking snares and traps he had set days before. Ilara followed, learning by watching, noting which signs he looked for, how he read the tracks in the mud, the broken branches that told stories of passing animals. At the fifth trap, they found a fox, its leg caught in the iron teeth, still alive but exhausted from struggling. Miko knelt beside it, his face grim. "I do not like this," he said quietly. "Then why use them?" Ilara asked. "Because steel traps catch more than snares," he said. "And more pelts mean more trade goods, and more trade goods mean I survive the winter." He reached for the fox, and Ilara saw the conflict in his eyes, the necessity warring with something gentler. Before he could act, she knelt beside him. "Let me," she said. Miko hesitated, then moved back slightly. Ilara spoke softly to the fox, her voice low and soothing. She placed one hand on its head, stroking gently while her other hand worked the trap mechanism. The fox whimpered but did not snap at her. And when the trap released, she lifted the animal carefully. Examining the injured leg, "It is not broken," she said. "Bruised and cut, but it will heal." "You should kill it," Miko said. "It will not survive with that injury." "It will if we help it," Ilara replied, already tearing a strip from the hem of her tunic to bind the wound. Miko watched her work, his expression unreadable. When she finished, she carried the fox to the edge of the clearing and set it down gently. It limped away slowly, disappearing into the underbrush. "You just gave up a pelt worth 2 weeks of food," Miko said. "I know," Ilara said, standing and brushing dirt from her knees. "Why?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Because some things are worth more than survival," she said. Miko stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, something softer. "You are strange," he said finally. "I have been called worse," she replied, echoing her words from days before. This time, his smile was not fleeting. It lingered, small but genuine. "Yes," he said. "I believe that." They walked back to camp in companionable silence, the rain tapering off as the afternoon wore on. When they arrived, Ilara noticed smoke rising from the fire pit, though they had banked it before leaving. Miko tensed immediately, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. He gestured for Ilara to stay behind him, then approached the shelter cautiously. A man sat by the fire, older than Miko, with gray streaking his long hair and deep lines carved into his weathered face. He wore buckskin and beads similar to Miko's. And when he looked up, his eyes were sharp and knowing. "Uncle," Miko said, surprise and wariness mixing in his tone. "Nephew," the man replied, his gaze shifting to Alara, who stood half-hidden behind Miko's shoulder. "I see you have found company. She is a guest," Miko said carefully. "A guest who wears your sister's clothes," the older man observed, rising to his feet with surprising grace. "Interesting." Alara stepped forward, lifting her chin. "My name is Alara Moss," she said. The man studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, then nodded slowly. "I am Dakota," he said. "Miko's uncle, and the one who taught him everything he knows about not trusting strangers." "Then he learned well," Alara said evenly. Dakota laughed, a short bark of sound. "She has spirit," he said to Miko. "Where did you find her?" "She found me," Miko replied. "And you let her stay," Dakota said, his tone sharpening. "Why?" "Because she fixed my wagon," Miko said. Dakota's eyes narrowed. "That is not a reason to trust someone." "It was reason enough for me," Miko replied. His voice firm, the two men stared at each other. Some unspoken conversation passing between them, Alara stood still, feeling like an intruder in a moment she did not fully understand. Finally, Dakota sighed and sat back down. "You are too soft, nephew," he said. But there was no real anger in his voice. "Just like your father." "My father survived 40 winters," Miko said. Sitting across from him, softness did not kill him. "No," Dakota agreed, "but trust did." The words hung heavy in the air, and Alara felt the weight of something old and painful between them. She moved to the far side of the fire, giving them space, busying herself with checking the food stores and pretending not to listen. But she heard every word. Dakota had come to warn Miko about settlers moving into the valley. Armed men who were staking claims and driving off anyone who resisted. He spoke of burned camps and stolen horses, of families forced to flee in the night. His voice was low and urgent, and Miko listened with a stillness that seemed to fill the entire shelter. "You should come west with us," Dakota said finally. "This land is not safe anymore." "This land is my home," Miko replied. "Home is where your people are," Dakota countered. "My people are everywhere this land touches," Miko said. "I will not abandon it." Dakota shook his head. "You are stubborn." "I learned from the best," Miko said, a faint smile touching his lips. Dakota rose, preparing to leave. He glanced once more at Alara, who met his gaze without flinching. "Be careful, nephew," he said. "Not all strangers are what they seem." "I know," Miko said, after Dakota left. The shelter felt colder, emptier. Miko sat staring into the fire, his face unreadable. Alara approached slowly, sitting beside him. "He cares about you," she said quietly. "He thinks I am foolish," Miko replied. "Maybe both are true," Alara said. Miko glanced at her, and despite the tension, his mouth quirked slightly. "You use my own words against me," he said. "They were good words," she replied. He nodded, the smile fading. "Dakota is right about one thing," he said. "Danger is coming. If you stay here, you may not be safe." "I have not been safe in a long time," Alara said. "At least here, I am not alone." Miko looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his eyes, something that made her heart beat faster. "No," he said softly. "You are not alone." And in the firelight, with the sound of rain beginning again outside, two people sat side by side. Not quite friends, not quite strangers, but something in between that neither of them had words for yet. The morning arrived with fog so thick it swallowed the trees whole, turning the forest into a ghost world where sound carried strange and direction became meaningless. Alara woke to find Miko already gone, the fire burning low. A note scratched into the dirt beside her sleeping mat with a stick. Checking northern traps back by midday. She rose and dressed quickly, stepping outside into the white silence. The fog pressed against her skin like cold breath, and she shivered despite the deerskin clothing. For a moment she considered waiting inside, but restlessness drove her forward. She had seen Miko working at a fish trap by the river days ago, half finished and set aside when other tasks demanded attention. Elara found it exactly where he had left it. A framework of willow branches woven together with sinew. Clever in design but incomplete, she knelt beside it and began working, her fingers remembering the patterns her father had taught her. The weaving that would funnel fish in but not let them escape. She worked until her hands ached and the fog began to lift, revealing the river running swift and dark below. When Miko returned, he found her waist-deep in the current, securing the trap to stones on the riverbed. Her hair plastered to her neck, her lips blue from cold. He stood on the bank watching until she noticed him, then waded out to help without a word. Together they anchored the trap properly, adjusting the angle so the current would work in their favor. When they climbed back onto the bank, both dripping and shaking, Miko built a quick fire to warm them. "You did not need to finish that," he said, stripping off his wet shirt and hanging it on a branch near the flames. "I wanted to," Elara replied, doing the same with her tunic.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Standing in her bindings and trying not to feel self-conscious, Miko handed her a dry blanket from his pack, wrapping one around himself as well. They sat close to the fire, shoulders nearly touching. Steam rising from their skin. "You know traps," he observed. "My father built them for mink and beaver," she said. "The principle is the same." "Where is he now?" Miko asked, his voice careful. "Dead," Elara said flatly. 5 years gone. He drowned checking his traps during spring flood. They found him 3 days later, caught in his own line. Miko was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry," he said finally. "So am I," she replied, staring into the flames. "He taught me everything about surviving in wild places, but he could not survive them himself." "Sometimes knowledge is not enough," Miko said. "No," Elara agreed. "Sometimes it is just cruel irony." They sat in silence until their clothes dried enough to wear, then walked back to camp together, the afternoon sun breaking through the last of the fog. When they arrived, they found the camp had been disturbed. Supplies scattered, the storage boxes opened and rifled through. Miko's expression darkened immediately, his hand moving to his knife as he scanned the clearing. Elara followed his gaze and saw what he saw. Boot prints in the mud, too large to be hers, too different from Miko's moccasin tracks. "Someone was here," she whispered. "Recently," Miko confirmed, kneeling to examine the prints. Within the last hour. A chill ran down Elara's spine that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "Who?" she asked. "I do not know," Miko said, rising and moving toward his shelter. But they were looking for something. Inside, the space had been thoroughly searched. Furs pulled from their neat stacks, tools moved and left carelessly. Even the carved bowl Miko had been working on had been examined and tossed aside. But nothing appeared to be taken. "What would they want?" Elara asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Miko did not answer immediately. He was staring at something on the ground near his sleeping area. A piece of paper, folded and sealed with wax. He picked it up carefully and broke the seal. His face went rigid as he read, the muscles in his jaw clenching. When he looked up at Elara, his eyes were hard. "What does it say?" she asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "It is a notice," he said, his voice controlled but edged with anger. "From the Territorial Land Office. They are claiming this area for settlement development. They say I have 30 days to vacate or be removed by force." They cannot do that, Ilara said, stepping closer. This is your land. Not according to them, Miko replied, crumpling the paper in his fist. According to them. This land belongs to whoever files the proper paperwork and pays the proper fees. My people have lived here for generations, but that means nothing to men with stamps and signatures. Ilara felt rage rising in her chest, hot and fierce. What will you do? She asked. I do not know yet, Miko admitted, but I will not leave. That night, neither of them slept well. Ilara lay awake listening to every sound outside, imagining men with guns coming through the darkness. Miko sat by the fire sharpening his weapons, his movements methodical and grim. The next few days passed in tense watchfulness. Miko set up warning lines around the camp, thin cords strung between trees that would rattle small bells if disturbed. Ilara helped him gather and hide supplies in multiple locations throughout the forest, preparing for the possibility of having to leave quickly. But they also continued their daily routines, checking traps, gathering food, maintaining the camp. There was a defiance in the normalcy, a refusal to be driven out before they were ready. One afternoon, while Ilara was grinding acorns into flour, a figure emerged from the tree line. Miko was beside her instantly, his bow already strung and ready, but the figure raised both hands in a gesture of peace. It was a woman, older than Ilara by a decade perhaps. With sun-darkened skin and tired eyes, she wore the remnants of what had once been fine clothing, now torn and stained, her feet wrapped in rags instead of proper boots. Please, the woman called out, her voice hoarse. I mean no harm, I only need water. Miko lowered his bow slightly, but did not put it away. Who are you? He asked. My name is Catherine, the woman said, taking a cautious step forward. Catherine Brenner. I have been walking for 3 days. Where from? Miko asked. The settlement at Cedar Falls, Catherine replied. Or what is left of it? Ilara stood, her grinding stone forgotten. What happened? She asked. Catherine's face crumpled. Raiders, she said. They came at night, burned half the buildings, took whatever they wanted. Some of us escaped into the woods. I have been hiding ever since. Miko and Ilara exchanged glances, then Miko gestured toward the fire. Sit, he said. We will bring water. Catherine practically collapsed onto the log Ilara had been using, her whole body shaking with exhaustion. Ilara brought her water and dried meat, watching as the woman drank desperately, spilling half of it down her chin, slowly, Ilara cautioned. Or you will make yourself sick. Catherine nodded and forced herself to slow down when she had drunk her fill. She looked at them both with red-rimmed eyes. Thank you, she said. I thought I would die out there. You are safe now, Ilara said, though she was not entirely sure it was true. Over the next hour, Catherine told them her story. How the settlement had been growing peacefully for 2 years. How families had built homes and planted crops. How everything had seemed hopeful until the night the raiders came. They wore bandanas over their faces, Catherine said. But I recognized some of them. They were men from the land office. Men who had tried to buy our claims for nothing and been refused. Miko's expression grew darker. They destroyed your settlement because you would not sell, he said. Yes, Catherine confirmed. And now they will file claims on the land themselves, saying it was abandoned. That is what they plan to do here, Ilara said quietly, looking at Miko. He nodded slowly. It is a pattern, he said. Drive people off, take the land. Make it legal after the fact. What can we do? Catherine asked. Desperation in her voice. We survive, Miko said simply. And we do not give them what they want. Catherine stayed with them that night, sleeping by the fire wrapped in borrowed furs. In the morning she was feverish, her skin hot to the touch, the exhaustion and exposure catching up to her all at once. Ilara tended her with cool cloths and herbal teas, drawing on everything her mother had taught her about healing. Miko kept watch, his unease growing with each passing hour. On the third day of Catherine's illness, riders appeared, 3 men on horseback, wearing official-looking badges and carrying rifles. They did not approach the camp directly, but stopped at the clearing's edge. One of them called out, "We are looking for a woman, Catherine Brenner. We have reason to believe she is in this area." Miko stepped forward, positioning himself between the riders and the shelter where Catherine lay sleeping. "Why do you seek her?" he asked. "She is wanted for questioning regarding the fire at Cedar Falls," the man said. "We believe she may have information about the raiders." "Or you believe she will tell people what she saw," Miko replied, his voice cold. The man's eyes narrowed. "That is a serious accusation, is it?" Miko said. "Or is it the truth you do not want spoken?" The tension stretched thin and dangerous. Ilara appeared at the shelter entrance, her hand resting conspicuously on the knife at her belt. The riders noticed her, and something shifted in their postures. "We will be back," the lead rider said finally. "With proper authority, this land is being claimed for settlement. Anyone occupying it illegally will be removed." "This is my home," Miko said. "It was my grandfather's home. And his grandfather's before him. Your papers mean nothing." "The law says otherwise," the rider replied, then turned his horse and rode away, the others following when they were gone. Ilara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "They will come back," she said. "I know," Miko replied, inside the shelter. Catherine had woken and heard everything. Tears streamed down her fevered face. "I have brought trouble to you," she whispered. "No," Ilara said firmly. Kneeling beside her, "They brought trouble. You are just someone who survived it." "They will not let me tell what I saw," Catherine said. "They will kill me if they have to." "Then we do not let them find you," Miko said from the doorway. Over the following days, they created a hidden shelter deeper in the forest, a place Catherine could stay while she recovered. They moved her there under cover of darkness, Ilara staying with her during the days while Miko maintained his visible presence at the main camp. It was during one of these days, while Ilara was gathering herbs near the hidden shelter, that she heard voices approaching. Men's voices, rough and careless. She froze, pressing herself against a large tree trunk. 2 men passed within feet of her, both carrying rifles. They were talking about the squatter problem and how to clear the land efficiently. One of them laughed about the fire at Cedar Falls, about how easy it had been to scatter the settlers. Ilara's blood ran cold. These were not lawmen. They were the raiders themselves, wearing badges as disguises. And they were planning to do the same thing here. She waited until they were gone, then ran back to the hidden shelter. "Catherine," she whispered urgently. "Wake up, we need to move you again." But when she entered the small space, she found it empty. Catherine was gone, and in the dirt where she had been lying, a message was scratched. "I will not bring more danger. Thank you for everything. Tell Miko I am sorry." Ilara stared at the message, fear and frustration warring inside her. Catherine was still weak, still sick. She would not survive long alone in the forest. She ran back to the main camp, finding Miko preparing the evening meal. "Catherine is gone," she said breathlessly. Miko stood immediately. "When?" he asked. "I do not know." "Within the last few hours," Ilara replied. "She left a message. She thinks she is protecting us." "She is condemning herself," Miko said grimly. "We need to find her before they do." They gathered supplies quickly, Miko reading the tracks Catherine had left, following her trail deeper into the forest. The sun was setting, shadows growing long and menacing. Ilara's heart pounded with each step, fear driving her forward. They found Catherine collapsed beside a stream, unconscious, her fever raging. Miko lifted her carefully while Ilara supported her weight. Together they carried her back, not to the camp or the hidden shelter, but to a cave Miko knew. A place even deeper in the wilderness, inside the cave. They built a small fire and laid Catherine on a bed of pine boughs. Alara worked through the night, keeping her cool, forcing water and medicine between her lips. Miko stood guard at the cave entrance, watching the darkness. As dawn broke, Catherine's fever finally broke as well. She opened her eyes and saw Alara's exhausted face hovering above her. "Why did you come for me?" she whispered. "Because you matter," Alara said simply. "And because we do not leave people behind." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I do not deserve such kindness," she said. "Kindness is not about deserving," Alara replied. "It is about choosing to be human." Miko appeared in the cave entrance, silhouetted against the morning light. "They are searching," he said quietly. "We heard dogs in the distance." "Then we stay here," Alara said, looking at Catherine, "until she is strong enough to travel properly." Miko nodded. "I will keep watch," he said. And so they stayed, 3 people in a cave, hiding from men who wanted to erase them, waiting for strength to return and decisions to be made. The world outside growing more dangerous with each passing hour. 5 days passed in the cave, each one measured by the slow return of color to Catherine's face and the increasing frequency of distant sounds that made Miko tense and reach for his weapons. They had rationed their supplies carefully, eating sparingly, drinking from the stream that ran past the cave entrance under cover of darkness. On the 6th morning, Catherine sat up on her own for the first time, her hands shaking but her eyes clear. "I need to leave," she said, her voice still weak but determined. "I am putting you both in danger. You are not strong enough," Alara replied, checking the woman's forehead for fever. "I am strong enough to walk," Catherine insisted. "And every day I stay is another day they have to find all of us." Miko, who had been sitting near the cave entrance cleaning his rifle, spoke without turning. "She is right," he said. "We cannot stay here much longer. The dogs are getting closer." Alara felt her stomach tighten. She had heard them too. The baying carrying through the forest at dawn and dusk. A sound that made her skin crawl with remembered fear. "Where can she go?" she asked. "There is a settlement 2 days north," Miko said. "Beyond the territorial boundary, the land office has no authority there. If Catherine can reach it, she will be safe." 2 days is a long journey for someone who could barely stand yesterday, Alara said. "Then we will help her," Miko replied, finally turning to look at them both. "We leave tonight." They spent the day preparing. Miko fashioned a walking stick from a sturdy branch, carving the grip smooth so it would not blister Catherine's palm. He tested its strength against his own weight, then adjusted the height until it matched her stride perfectly. Alara packed food and medicine into a small satchel Catherine could carry, dividing the supplies into equal portions, calculating how much they would need for the journey versus how much Catherine would need when she reached safety. As the afternoon wore on, Alara gathered additional herbs from the area surrounding the cave, plants she recognized for their ability to sustain energy and reduce inflammation. She crushed them between stones and mixed them with a small amount of honey Miko had stored in a sealed container, creating a paste Catherine could eat during the journey when her strength flagged. Miko worked on his weapons, ensuring everything was clean and functional. He checked his bowstring for fraying, counted his arrows, sharpened his knife until the edge could split a hair. These were the preparations of a man expecting trouble. And Alara watched him work with growing unease. "Do you think they will find us on the road?" she asked quietly. "I think they will try," Miko replied, not looking up from his work. "But trying and succeeding are different things." Catherine had been resting, conserving her energy for the journey ahead. But now she sat up and looked at them both with eyes that had seen too much. "You should not come with me," she said. "I can make it on my own." "No, you cannot," Alara said bluntly. "And we are not debating this again. I have already cost you so much," Catherine protested. "You have cost us nothing," Miko said, his voice firm. "The men hunting you are the ones creating cost. And we choose not to pay their price." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. But she nodded and said nothing more. When darkness fell, they extinguished the fire and moved out into the forest. Catherine between them, one hand on Alara's shoulder, the other on Miko's arm. The night was moonless, clouds covering the stars, making the forest an impenetrable darkness that swallowed everything beyond a few feet. The journey was slow and treacherous. Roots and stones hidden in shadow threatened to trip them with every step. Catherine's breathing grew labored after the first hour, harsh and ragged in the silence. But she did not complain, did not ask to stop. She simply put one foot in front of the other with grim determination. They rested briefly near midnight, huddled in the hollow of a massive fallen tree, its trunk wide enough to shelter all three of them from view. Miko shared out water and dried meat while Alara rubbed Catherine's legs to keep the circulation flowing, working the muscles that had begun to cramp from the unaccustomed exertion. "Why are you doing this?" Catherine asked quietly, looking between them. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing. We know enough," Alara said, her hands never stopping their work. "And we owe everyone the dignity of survival," Miko added. "It is what separates us from the men hunting you." Catherine wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "If I live through this, I will remember your names," she said, her voice breaking. "I will tell people what you did. I will make sure they know there are still good people in this world." "Just live," Alara said. "That is enough." They continued walking until dawn painted the sky gray, the darkness gradually giving way to pale light that filtered through the canopy in thin streams. Then they found shelter in a dense thicket of brambles where they could rest hidden from view, the thorns providing natural protection against casual discovery. Miko took first watch while Alara and Catherine slept fitfully, the sounds of the forest keeping them half alert even in exhaustion. Birds began their morning songs, and somewhere distant a woodpecker hammered against a tree. The normal sounds of the wilderness that should have been comforting but now felt exposing. When Alara woke hours later, the sun was high and Miko was gone. Panic seized her briefly until she noticed fresh footprints leading away from their hiding spot, deliberately placed so she would see them and understand he had left a scout ahead rather than simply vanished. She settled back down, keeping Catherine company, listening to the woman's steady breathing and the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Miko returned an hour later, his face grim, moving through the brambles with practiced silence. "There are riders on the road ahead," he said without preamble. "4 of them, armed, they are checking everyone who passes." "Can we go around?" Alara asked, already knowing the answer from his expression. "Not without adding another day to the journey," Miko replied. "And Catherine does not have another day in her." Catherine struggled to sit up, her face pale but resolute. "Then I will face them," she said. "I will not have you risk yourselves further." "They will arrest you or worse," Alara said sharply. "That is not an option." Miko knelt down, his dark eyes thoughtful. "There may be another way," he said. "The river runs parallel to the road for the next few miles. If we can build a raft, we can float past them unseen." "Do we have time to build a raft?" Alara asked. "If we work quickly," Miko said, already rising. "And if we use what the forest provides instead of trying to make something perfect." They moved to the river, following Miko through the forest until they reached a wide stretch of water that ran swift and cold, the current strong enough to carry them, but not so violent that it would be unmanageable. Miko selected dead logs that had collected along the bank, testing each one for buoyancy by pushing them into the water and watching how they floated. Alara gathered vines and strong grasses to bind them together, her fingers working quickly despite the urgency making them clumsy. Catherine helped as much as her strength allowed, plaiting the vines into rope using a technique she said her grandmother had taught her. Her movements slow but steady. The work took hours. The sun sliding toward the horizon as they labored in focused silence. Ilara's hands grew raw from weaving the tough fibers, blood seeping from small cuts where the vines had scraped her palms. And Miko's shoulders ached from dragging logs into position. But slowly the raft took shape, crude but functional. Large enough for 3 people if they sat carefully and did not shift their weight too suddenly. As twilight descended, they pushed the raft into the water, the logs responding sluggishly at first before the current caught them. Catherine settled in the middle, wrapped in blankets to keep her warm and low to reduce visibility. Ilara at the front with a makeshift paddle fashioned from a flat piece of bark lashed to a branch. Miko at the back to steer using a longer pole. The current caught them immediately, pulling them downstream faster than Ilara had anticipated. The water rushing beneath the logs with a force that made the entire structure shudder and creak. She paddled hard, trying to keep them in the center of the river where the current was strongest and they would move fastest. The river was louder than the forest, the rush of water over rocks drowning out other sounds, which was both blessing and curse. They could not hear if anyone was near, but neither could anyone hear them. Ilara focused on keeping the raft away from obstacles, spotting rocks and fallen branches in time to steer around them. They rounded a bend and saw the road above them, running parallel to the river, just as Miko had said. And there, standing in a cluster near a makeshift checkpoint, were the riders, 4 men with rifles and badges, stopping a wagon that had tried to pass, their voices carrying down to the water in fragments. Ilara held her breath as they floated closer. Miko had maneuvered them to the far side of the river, using the current and an overhanging bank to keep them partially hidden. Catherine lay flat on the raft, her eyes squeezed shut, her lips moving in what might have been prayer. They drifted past slowly, agonizingly slowly, close enough that Ilara could see the faces of the men clearly, could see the badges glinting in the fading light, could see the casual cruelty in the way they handled the wagon driver's belongings, tossing things aside without care. She could hear their voices now, harsh and demanding, asking the wagon driver if he had seen a woman traveling alone, describing Catherine in detail. The driver's nervous responses, insisting he had seen no one, the sound of supplies being searched roughly, boxes overturned, the driver protesting weakly. Then they were past, the curve of the river carrying them out of sight. But Ilara did not breathe easy until they had floated another quarter mile. Only then did she allow herself to look back, seeing nothing but empty water behind them and the darkening sky above. "We made it," Catherine whispered, sitting up carefully, her whole body shaking. "Not yet," Miko said, his voice steady but strained. "We still have miles to go." They floated through the night, taking turns paddling, fighting exhaustion and the cold that seeped up from the water and into their bones, making their muscles stiff and their movements clumsy. When dawn came, they pulled the raft ashore near a grove of willows, their arms trembling from the long hours of effort. "The settlement is close," Miko said, pointing to smoke rising in the distance, multiple columns suggesting a community of significant size. 2 hours walk, maybe 3. Catherine stood on shaking legs, using the walking stick Miko had made, but there was determination in her face now, hope replacing the resignation that had shadowed her for days. "I can make it," she said, and this time Ilara believed her. They walked the final distance together, emerging from the forest to find a small but thriving community, houses built from timber with real glass windows, fields planted and tended with obvious care, people moving about their morning tasks with the ease of those who felt safe in their homes. It looked peaceful, organized, everything Cedar Falls had been before the raiders came, and Ilara felt something twist in her chest at the sight, both hope that such places could exist and fear of what might happen if the wrong people found them. Miko approached a man working near the edge of the settlement, repairing a fence with practiced efficiency. "We are looking for sanctuary," he said simply. No elaborate explanation, just the plain truth. The man studied them carefully, noting their exhaustion. Catherine's obvious illness despite her brave face. The way Ilara and Miko positioned themselves protectively on either side of her. Then he nodded slowly. Come, he said. We will find you food and shelter. They were taken to a large communal house where a woman named Sarah took charge of Catherine, leading her away to rest and recover properly, with real medicine and clean beds and safety. Ilara watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of relief and loss, as if something important was ending. She will be safe here, the man who had greeted them said. His name was Thomas, and he served as something like a mayor for the settlement, elected by the community to handle disputes and organization. We do not answer to the territorial land office, and we do not let raiders dictate who deserves shelter.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
Thank you, Ilara said quietly, the words inadequate for what she felt. Thomas looked at Miko, recognition dawning in his eyes. I know your people, he said. Some of them passed through here last year. Heading west, they spoke of the old places and the one who stayed behind to protect them. My family, Miko confirmed. They spoke of you, Thomas continued. Said you stayed behind to protect the old places, to keep the memory alive. Yes, Miko replied, offering nothing more. That is a heavy burden for one man, Thomas observed, his tone respectful rather than pitying. It is my burden, Miko said simply. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding what was left unsaid. You are welcome to stay as long as you need, he said. Both of you. We have room and we have work if you want it. That night, they were given a small cabin at the edge of the settlement, a place to sleep properly for the first time in over a week, with a real door that locked and walls that held back the wind. Ilara collapsed onto a real bed, her body giving out the moment she felt safe, sinking into unconsciousness so quickly she did not even remember closing her eyes. When she woke, it was late afternoon, sunlight streaming through the window in golden bars, dust motes dancing in the light. Miko sat at a small table, sharpening his knife with the methodical patience she had come to recognize. He looked up as she stirred. You needed the rest, he said. So did you, she replied, noticing the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. I rested enough, he said, returning to his work, the scrape of stone against metal rhythmic and soothing. Ilara sat up, her body aching in new ways, muscles she had forgotten existed making themselves known. What happens now? She asked, the question hanging heavy between them. Miko was quiet for a long moment, his hands never stopping their work. I do not know, he admitted finally. The land office will not stop. They will keep pushing until they take everything, until there is nothing left of the old ways or the old places. Then we push back, Ilara said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. This is not your fight, he said. You could stay here, build a life in this settlement, be safe for once. Yes, it is, she replied firmly. The moment you gave me shelter, the moment. You chose to see me as human instead of a problem to be solved. It became my fight too. You could stay here, Miko repeated, as if he needed to say it again, to make sure she understood what she was giving up. I could, Ilara agreed, but I will not, and you cannot make me. Why? He asked, the question heavy with meaning beyond the single word. She met his gaze. Because I have been running my whole life, she said, running from poverty, from violence, from people who saw me as less than human, and I am tired of it. Because you showed me what it means to stand for something instead of just surviving. And because leaving you to face this alone would make me exactly the kind of person I have spent years trying not to become. Miko set down his knife, his eyes never leaving hers. You understand what you are choosing, he said. It will not be easy. It may not even be survivable. They have guns and law and numbers on their side. I understand, Ilara said, and I choose it anyway. He nodded slowly, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement, a commitment, a shift in the ground they stood on that changed everything. "Then we return tomorrow," he said, "and we prepare for what comes next." That evening, they ate with Catherine one last time. She looked better already. Color in her cheeks, steadiness in her hands, the haunted look beginning to fade from her eyes. "I owe you my life," she said to them both, tears streaming down her face. "You owe us nothing." Ilara replied, taking the woman's hand, "Just live it well. Live it fully. Make it mean something." Catherine squeezed her hand tightly. "If you ever need help," she said, "if you ever need someone to speak truth about what is happening, you send word. I will tell everyone who will listen. I will make sure they know what these men are doing." "We will remember," Miko said, and Ilara knew he meant it. They left at dawn, retracing their steps through the forest. The journey back felt different, purposeful rather than desperate. No longer fleeing but returning, Ilara walked beside Miko, their strides matching, their silence comfortable in a way it had not been before. "What will we do when we get back?" she asked after several hours of walking. "We will fortify the camp," Miko said, his voice taking on a planning tone. "Prepare defenses, gather allies if we can find them, and we will make it clear that we will not be moved without a fight." "They have guns and numbers," Ilara pointed out, playing devil's advocate. "They have arrogance and paperwork," Miko countered. "We have knowledge of the land and reason on our side." "Reason does not always win," she said, thinking of all the injustices she had witnessed. "No," he agreed, "but it is worth fighting for anyway, because the alternative is to let them win without contest. And I cannot do that." They reached the cave where they had sheltered before, stopping to rest and gather supplies they had left behind. As they worked, Ilara noticed Miko watching her, his expression thoughtful in a way that made her self-conscious. "What?" she asked, pausing in her work. "You have changed," he said, "since the day I found you in the storm fixing my wagon." "So have you," she replied, holding his gaze. He smiled slightly. "Yes," he agreed, "I have. You made me remember that fighting alone is just another form of giving up." They continued on, reaching the main camp as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Nothing had been disturbed in their absence. The shelter stood as they had left it, the fire pit cold but intact, everything waiting as if they had never gone. Miko immediately began checking the warning lines while Ilara rekindled the fire, falling into the rhythm they had established, working together without needing to discuss who would do what. As darkness fell and they sat together eating a simple meal of dried meat and foraged greens, Ilara felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. She had spent so long just trying to survive, just trying to make it through one more day without being noticed or hurt. But now she had something more. She had a reason to fight, a place worth defending, and someone worth standing beside. Miko looked at her across the fire. "Tomorrow we begin building our defenses," he said, "real defenses. Not just warning lines, but actual fortifications." "Tomorrow," Ilara agreed, "and every day after until we win or we fall." "We will not fall," Miko said with quiet certainty. "No," Ilara replied, believing it for the first time in her life. "We will not." And in that moment, beneath the vast and different stars that had witnessed countless struggles before theirs, two people made a silent promise to each other and to the land they stood on. A promise written not in words but in the simple act of refusing to run, of choosing to stay and fight for what mattered. Together, come what may, the work began before sunrise. Miko and Ilara moving through the preyed-on darkness with purpose that had been sharpened by their journey north. They had seen what happened to those who were unprepared, who believed safety was something given rather than something earned through vigilance and effort. Miko started by mapping the natural defenses of their position, walking the perimeter of the camp with Ilara following, learning as he pointed out sightlines and approaches. "The river protects us here," he said, indicating the western edge where the water ran deep and fast. No one crosses that without making noise. But the eastern approach is open, Ilara observed, looking at the gentle slope that led up from the forest. Yes, Miko agreed, so we make it less open. They spent the morning digging a shallow trench along the eastern perimeter. Not deep enough to stop a determined attacker, but sufficient to slow horses and force anyone approaching to think twice about their route. The work was brutal, the soil rocky and resistant. Ilara's hands blistered despite the calluses she had built up over weeks of labor. By midday, they had completed perhaps a third of the trench. Both of them filthy and exhausted, Miko called a halt and they ate quickly. Dried venison and water, no conversation. Just the sound of their breathing and the forest around them. We need more than ditches, Ilara said finally, wiping sweat from her forehead. I know, Miko replied, but ditches are a start. They change how someone thinks about approaching. They create hesitation. Hesitation is not the same as protection, she said. No, he agreed, but it buys time, and time is what we need most. That afternoon they worked on sharpening stakes, dozens of them, cut from young trees and honed to vicious points. These would be planted in the trench at angles, creating an obstacle that would injure horses and tear at the legs of anyone foolish enough to charge through. The work was tedious and precise, each stake needing to be strong enough to hold under weight, but sharp enough to penetrate. Ilara found a rhythm in it, the scrape of her knife against wood, the smell of fresh-cut timber, the growing pile of finished stakes beside her. Miko watched her work with something like approval. You learn quickly, he said. I have had good teachers, she replied. Not looking up, your father, he said. Yes, she agreed, and you, he said nothing to that. But she saw the slight smile that touched his face before he returned to his own work. As evening approached, a sound reached them from the forest. The crack of a branch breaking under weight. Both of them froze, weapons appearing in their hands as if summoned. Miko gestured for Ilara to move behind him. Positioning himself between her and the sound, a figure emerged from the trees. Hands raised, moving slowly and deliberately. It was a young man, perhaps 20, with the lean build of someone who had missed too many meals. His clothes were torn and his face bore fresh bruises. I mean no harm, he called out, his voice shaking slightly. I am looking for Miko. You found him, Miko replied, not lowering his weapon. Who are you? My name is Daniel, the young man said. Catherine Brenner sent me. She said you helped her. Said you might help others. Miko and Ilara exchanged glances. Come forward slowly, Miko said. Keep your hands where I can see them, Daniel approached. And as he drew closer, they could see the extent of his injuries. One eye was swollen nearly shut, his lips split. Bruises darkening his jaw and neck. He moved with the careful gait of someone nursing broken ribs. What happened to you? Ilara asked, her anger rising at the obvious signs of violence. The land office men, Daniel said, lowering his hands once Miko gestured that he could. They came to our farm 3 days ago, said we were squatting on claimed territory. My father argued, said we had been there 5 years. Had paperwork from the old land grant. They did not care about paperwork, Miko said. It was not a question. No, Daniel confirmed. They beat my father until he could not stand, burned our crops, killed our livestock. Told us we had 1 week to leave or they would come back and burn the house with us inside. Where is your family now? Ilara asked. Gone, Daniel said, his voice breaking. My father took my mother and sisters north, to the settlement where Catherine is. But I came back. Why? Miko asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. Because running is not the same as surviving, he said. Because if we all run, they win. And I am tired of letting them win. Ilara felt something resonate in his words, an echo of her own thoughts from days before. She looked at Miko and saw him considering the young man with new interest. Can you fight? Miko asked bluntly. I can learn, Daniel replied. I can dig, I can build. I can do whatever needs doing. Can you follow orders without question? Miko pressed. If the orders make sense, Daniel said, meeting his gaze steadily. I will not follow foolish commands just because someone gives them. Miko's expression shifted. Something that might have been respect. Good, he said. Foolish obedience gets people killed. He lowered his weapon completely and gestured toward the camp. You can stay, he said, but understand what you are choosing. We are preparing to fight, not to run, if you stay. You may die. If I run, something inside me dies anyway, Daniel said. At least here I die fighting for something. That night they ate together around the fire. Daniel wolfing down food with the desperation of someone who had not eaten properly in days. Ilara tended his injuries with the herbs she had gathered, cleaning the wounds and applying poultices to reduce swelling. They will come for you too, Daniel said to Miko as Ilara worked. Catherine told me what you are doing. They will not tolerate resistance. I know, Miko replied calmly. Then why stay? Daniel asked, genuine confusion in his voice. You could go west with your people. Be safe. Safety is an illusion, Miko said. Today it is my land they want. Tomorrow it will be the land your people fled to. Eventually there is nowhere left to run. So we stop running now, Daniel nodded slowly. Understanding settling over his battered face. What do you need me to do? He asked. Rest tonight, Miko said. Tomorrow you work. The following days fell into a pattern of exhausting labor. With Daniel's help, they completed the trench and planted the stakes, then moved on to building elevated platforms in the trees surrounding the camp, positions from which they could see approaching threats and defend with arrows if necessary. Daniel proved stronger than he looked, willing to work until his hands bled and his muscles screamed. He asked questions constantly, learning everything Miko would teach him about tracking, about reading the forest, about thinking like both predator and prey. Ilara watched them work together and felt something shift in the dynamic of the camp. They were no longer just two people hiding. They were becoming something more organized, something more dangerous. On the fourth day after Daniel's arrival, Miko called them both together as the sun reached its peak. We need to know what we are facing, he said. I am going into town to gather information, to learn how many men the land office has, what weapons they carry, what their plans are. That is too dangerous, Ilara protested immediately. They know your face, which is why I will be careful, Miko replied. But we cannot fight blind, we need intelligence. Then I will go, Daniel offered. They do not know me, I can blend in. Miko considered this. You are injured, he pointed out. You will draw attention. Then I will go, Ilara said, the idea forming even as she spoke it. I am a woman, they will not see me as a threat. I can move through town gathering information without raising suspicion. Absolutely not, Miko said immediately, his voice harder than she had heard it before. Why not? She challenged. Because I am a woman. Because you are known, he said, the bounty hunter who came looking for you. He may have spread your description if they connect you to me, to this camp. We lose any advantage we have. He saw me once, in the dark. Exhausted and filthy, Ilara argued. I can change how I look, braid my hair differently, wear different clothes, act differently. It is too risky, Miko insisted. Everything is too risky, Ilara shot back. But we still have to do it. They stared at each other across the fire, neither willing to back down. Finally Daniel spoke up. What if we both go? He suggested. Brother and sister traveling through. Looking for work, two people draw less suspicion than one. And we can watch each other's backs. Miko turned his sharp gaze on Daniel. You would risk yourself for someone you barely know, he said. I would risk myself for people trying to do the right thing, Daniel replied simply. Miko was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he thought. Finally he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "You go together," he said. "You stay together, you watch each other. And at the first sign of trouble you run. Do you understand?" "Yes," they both said. "I mean it," Miko pressed, looking at Alara with an intensity that made her breath catch. "At the first sign of trouble, you run. Do not try to fight. Do not try to be brave. You run and you come back here." "I understand," Alara said softly, seeing the fear he was trying to hide beneath his stern exterior. They prepared carefully. Alara braided her hair in a style she had never worn before. Neat and severe, the kind worn by proper town women. Daniel gave her his sister's dress, which he had been carrying in his pack. Simple brown cotton that made her look ordinary. Forgettable, Miko watched them transform. His expression unreadable. When they were ready to leave, he pulled Alara aside, speaking too quietly for Daniel to hear. "Come back," he said, not a command but a plea. "I will," she promised, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The walk to town took 3 hours, Alara and Daniel moving at a steady pace, practicing their story as they walked. They were siblings looking for work. Their family farm had failed. They were willing to do any honest labor. The town was larger than Alara had expected, perhaps 200 people. With a main street lined with businesses and side streets, branching off into residential areas, they entered at mid-morning, when the streets were busy enough that 2 more travelers would not draw immediate attention. They split up as planned, Alara heading to the general store while Daniel went to the saloon. Both places where information flowed freely if you knew how to listen. The general store was run by a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Alara browsed slowly, picking up items and examining them while listening to the conversations around her. 2 men stood near the counter, discussing the recent land acquisitions. "Another 20 parcels this month," one said. "Johnson is making a fortune off the resettlement fees." "Easy money when you have the law on your side," the other replied. "Though I heard some of the squatters are refusing to leave." "Fools," the first man snorted. "Johnson has 30 men working for him now. All armed, all mean, anyone who resists gets what they deserve." Alara's hand tightened on the can she was holding. 30 men, that was worse than she had feared. She set the can down and moved toward the fabric section, closer to where 2 women were gossiping. "Did you hear about the Brenner woman?" one was saying. "They found her up north, trying to spread lies about the land office." Alara's blood ran cold. "What happened to her?" the other woman asked. "They are bringing her back for trial," the first woman said with satisfaction. "Going to make an example of her, show people what happens when you try to interfere with legal business." Alara forced herself to breathe normally, to keep browsing as if she had not just heard that Catherine was in danger. She purchased a spool of thread she did not need and left the store, finding Daniel waiting at their agreed meeting spot. One look at his face told her he had heard similar news. They walked quickly toward the edge of town, not running but moving with purpose. Once they were back in the forest, Daniel grabbed her arm. "They are planning a raid," he said urgently. 3 days from now. They are going to sweep the entire Western Valley. Remove anyone who has not complied with the land office orders. "I heard," Alara said, "and I heard about Catherine." "We have to warn Miko," Daniel said. "We have to do more than warn him," Alara replied, her mind racing. "We have to get Catherine out before they bring her back." "That is impossible," Daniel protested. "They will have her under guard." "Nothing is impossible," Alara said. "Just difficult." They ran back to camp. Arriving breathless and urgent, Miko was sharpening arrows when they burst into the clearing. He stood immediately, reading the emergency in their faces. "What happened?" he demanded. They told him everything. The 30 armed men, the planned raid, Catherine's capture. Miko listened without interrupting. his face growing darker with each revelation. "We have 3 days to prepare," he said when they finished. "And we need to decide whether we fight or we run." "We fight," Ilara said immediately. "Against 30 armed men," Miko said. Not dismissing the idea, but forcing them to face reality. "The 3 of us, we find others," Daniel suggested. "There must be other people in the valley who will fight." "There are," Miko confirmed. "But convincing them to risk their lives is another matter." "Then we convince them," Ilara said. "We tell them what we know. We show them that running only delays the inevitable. We give them a reason to stand." Miko looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we split up," he said. "We have 3 days to find allies and prepare. I will go to the scattered homesteads to the east. Daniel, you go south to the trappers' camps. Ilara, you go north to the settlement and warn them about Catherine. And get her out if I can," Ilara added. "If you can," Miko agreed reluctantly. "But do not die trying. 1 person is not worth 3. "Every person is worth fighting for," Ilara said quietly. "That is the point of all this." They prepared to leave immediately, gathering supplies and weapons. Miko pulled Ilara aside one more time before she left. "Be smart," he said. "Be careful, be ruthless if you have to be. But come back," she nodded, unable to trust her voice. Then did something that surprised them both. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and fierce. "I will come back," she said. "We all will. And we will have an army at our backs." He caught her hand as she turned to go, holding it for just a moment. "I believe you," he said, and with that, the 3 of them scattered into the forest, racing against time and fate, carrying with them the fragile hope that courage might be contagious, that standing together might actually be enough. Ilara ran through the forest with purpose burning in her chest, her mind already planning how to reach the northern settlement, how to warn Thomas and the others, how to somehow free Catherine from armed guards without getting them all killed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire, and somewhere in the gathering darkness a storm was coming, one made not of rain and wind but of violence and choice. And Ilara ran toward it with her eyes wide open, knowing that the next 3 days would decide everything. Whether they lived or died, whether they fought or fled, whether justice meant anything at all in a world that seemed determined to crush anyone who dared to stand for it. She ran faster, her breath burning in her lungs, her heart pounding with fear and determination and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. Ilara reached the northern settlement as the last light bled from the sky, her lungs burning from the sustained run, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She stumbled into the main square where people were gathering for the evening meal, their faces turning toward her with concern and curiosity. Thomas emerged from the communal house, recognition flashing across his face. "Ilara," he said, moving quickly to support her as she swayed. "What has happened?" "Catherine," she gasped out. "They have Catherine. They are bringing her back for trial. They are going to make an example of her." The murmur that ran through the gathered crowd was equal parts shock and anger. Sarah pushed through to Ilara's side, pressing a cup of water into her shaking hands. "When?" she demanded. "They are moving her now," Ilara said after drinking deeply. "She will be in their custody within 2 days. And in 3 days they are raiding the entire Western Valley. 30 armed men. They are going to clear everyone out." 30 men, Thomas repeated, his face grave. "That is a small army." "It is enough," someone called from the crowd. "Enough to kill anyone who resists." "Then we do not resist," another voice suggested. "We leave, we go further north, beyond their reach." "There is no beyond their reach," Ilara said, her voice strengthening as her breath returned. "Today it is the Western Valley, tomorrow it will be here. Eventually there is nowhere left to run. We have to stop them now." "With what?" a man challenged. Stepping forward, he was older, gray-haired, with the weathered face of someone who had lived hard years. "We are farmers and craftsmen, not soldiers. And they are thieves and murderers wearing badges," Ilara shot back. "Being a soldier is not about training. It is about choosing to fight for what matters." "Easy words when you are not the one being asked to die," the man said. "I am being asked to die," Ilara replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I am going back to fight whether you come or not, but I would rather not die alone. And I would rather not watch everyone I care about get driven from their homes, because good people decided it was easier to run." Silence fell over the gathering, heavy and uncomfortable. Thomas spoke into it, his voice measured. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. "I am proposing we get Catherine out before they can use her as an example," Ilara said. "And I am proposing we make it clear that taking our land will cost them more than it is worth." "That is not a plan," someone pointed out. "That is a wish." "Then help me make it a plan," Ilara said, looking around at the faces watching her. Some skeptical, some afraid, some thoughtful. Miko is gathering allies from the homesteads. Daniel is rallying the trappers, but we need more than fighters. We need people willing to stand together, to show these men that we will not be scattered like frightened animals. Sarah stepped forward, her face set with determination. "I will go," she said. "Catherine saved my daughter from fever 2 years ago. I owe her my child's life." "I will go," said a young man near the back, barely old enough to shave. "My father lost his land to these men. He died broken-hearted. Someone needs to answer for that." One by one, others stepped forward. Not everyone, but enough, 12 in total, ranging from Sarah's 40 years to the young man's 18. Farmers and hunters and one blacksmith who promised to bring weapons. Thomas watched them gather, then nodded slowly. "I will come as well," he said, "not to fight if it can be avoided, but to witness, to make sure that whatever happens, the truth is told afterward." Ilara felt gratitude wash through her. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Do not thank us yet," Thomas replied grimly. "We may all be dead in 3 days." They spent the night planning, mapping out the route Catherine's captors would likely take, identifying points where they might intercept, discussing how to free one woman from armed guards without starting a battle they could not win. The blacksmith, whose name was Marcus, brought the weapons he had promised. A collection of hunting rifles, old muskets, knives, and axes. Not an army's arsenal, but enough to make a stand if it came to that. As dawn approached, Ilara stood at the edge of the settlement, looking south toward where Miko's camp lay hidden in the forest, wondering if he had found allies, if Daniel had succeeded with the trappers, if they would have enough people to make this anything other than a noble suicide. Sarah joined her, carrying 2 packs of supplies. "You love him," she said quietly. It was not a question. Ilara did not deny it. "Yes," she admitted, "though I have not told him." "You should," Sarah said, "before it is too late. Before the world takes the chance away." "If we survive this," Ilara said, "I will tell him." "Tell him anyway," Sarah advised. "Life is too short and too brutal to wait for perfect moments." They left at first light, 13 people moving through the forest in a loose formation. Marcus and Thomas leading the way, Ilara bringing up the rear, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. They moved quickly but carefully, knowing that noise would betray them. By midday, they reached the coordinates Ilara had calculated. A narrow valley where the road from the northern territories joined the main route south. If Catherine's captors were bringing her back, they would have to pass through here. They positioned themselves in the rocks above the road, concealed but with clear lines of sight. Marcus distributed the rifles to those who knew how to use them. The others armed themselves with whatever they had brought. Then they settled in to wait. Hours passed. The sun climbing and then descending, tension building with each minute. Ilara's hands cramped from gripping her knife. Her eyes ached from watching the empty road. Doubt began to creep in. What if they had already passed? What if they had taken a different route? What if this was all for nothing? Then Sarah touched her arm and pointed. "There," she whispered. 4 riders appeared around the bend. 2 in front, 2 behind, and between them, walking with her hands bound, was Catherine. Even from a distance, Alara could see she was limping. Could see the bruises darkening her face. Rage flooded through her. Hot and clarifying, Thomas raised his hand. The signal they had agreed upon. Everyone tensed. Marcus sighted down his rifle, aiming carefully at the front rider's hat. The plan was simple. Fire a warning shot, demand Catherine's release. Hope the guards valued their lives more than their orders. The shot cracked through the valley like thunder. The front rider's hat flew off his head. The horses reared and screamed. The guards shouted in confusion. Reaching for their weapons, "Release the woman," Thomas called out. His voice amplified by the rocks. "Release her and ride away. No one else needs to die today." "Show yourselves," one of the guards shouted back. "Show yourselves or we kill her now." Alara's heart stopped. She saw the guard nearest Catherine draw his pistol. Saw him press it against her head. Catherine's eyes were wide, but defiant. She was not begging, not crying, just standing straight despite her obvious pain. "Now," Alara hissed, and they all stood. Rifles and weapons raised. 13 people appearing on the rocks above the road. The guards saw them and went still. Calculating odds, weighing their chances. "You are outnumbered," Thomas said. "And outgunned. Release the woman and go. Or we will make sure none of you leave this valley." The guard with the pistol hesitated, his hand shaking slightly. "You are interfering with official business," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You are kidnapping an innocent woman," Sarah called out. "There's nothing official about it." "She is a witness to crimes," the guard insisted. "She needs to stand trial." "She is a witness to your crimes," Alara shouted. "And you want to silence her before she can tell anyone what she saw." The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Alara could see the guards conferring in low voices. Could see them glancing at their odds, 4 against 13. In an exposed position with no cover. Finally, the guard with the pistol lowered it. "This is not over," he said, cutting Catherine's bonds with his knife. "This is just beginning." "We know," Alara replied. "We are counting on it." Catherine stumbled forward. Sarah rushed down to catch her, helping her up the slope while the others kept their weapons trained on the guards. The 4 men mounted their horses and rode away slowly, looking back repeatedly as if memorizing faces. When they were gone, the group collapsed in relief. Catherine was crying now, clutching Sarah and thanking her over and over. Marcus was reloading his rifle with shaking hands. The young man who had volunteered was being sick behind a rock. "That was the easy part," Thomas said quietly to Alara. "Now comes the hard part." She nodded, knowing he was right. They had declared themselves openly now. Had made themselves targets. There was no going back. They made their way south as quickly as Catherine's injuries allowed, moving through the forest in a defensive formation, expecting pursuit at any moment. By nightfall, they reached the rendezvous point Miko had specified. A clearing with a spring where they could defend if necessary. Miko was already there, along with 7 homesteaders he had convinced to join them. Weathered men and women who had worked the land for decades and were not willing to give it up without a fight. Daniel arrived shortly after with 5 trappers. Lean, hard men who moved like shadows and spoke little. When Miko saw Alara, the relief that flooded his face was so intense it made her breath catch. He crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her tightly. "You came back," he said into her hair. "I said I would," she replied, her voice muffled against his chest. "You brought an army," he said, pulling back to look at the assembled group. "We all did," she corrected. "Is it enough?" It will have to be, Miko replied. That night they made camp. 37 people gathered around multiple fires, eating and talking in low voices, planning for what would come with the dawn. Miko stood before them all and laid out the situation with brutal honesty. Tomorrow they will come, he said. 30 armed men, maybe more, they will come to drive us out. To take this land and make it theirs, we can run. Scatter into the forest and hope they do not hunt us down one by one. Or we can stand together, make them understand that this land is not free for the taking. What are our chances? One of the trappers asked bluntly. Honestly, Miko said, not good. They have better weapons, more experience, the law on their side. But we have knowledge of this land, we have the element of surprise. And we have something they do not have. What is that? Someone asked. A reason to fight that goes beyond money, Miko replied. They are here because they are paid to be here. We are here because this is our home. That matters. Will it matter enough? The trapper pressed. We are about to find out, Miko said. They took shifts sleeping. Half the group resting while half stood watch. Ilara found herself on the first watch with Miko, standing at the edge of the camp staring into the darkness. I am sorry I got you into this, Miko said quietly. You did not get me into anything, Ilara replied. I chose this. I choose it every day. Why? He asked, the question he had asked before, the one she had never fully answered. She turned to face him, seeing his face in the moonlight. Strong and beautiful and afraid. Because you saw me when I was invisible, she said. Because you gave me shelter when I had none. Because you treated me like I mattered when the world had spent years teaching me I did not. Because somewhere between fixing your wagon and standing here now, I stopped just surviving and started living. Miko reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. If we survive tomorrow, he said, if we somehow make it through what is coming. We will, Ilara interrupted. We will survive because we have to. Because there are too many people counting on us. Because the alternative is unacceptable. If we survive, Miko continued as if she had not spoken, I want you to stay, not as a guest. Not as someone working for shelter, but as my equal, as my partner. As the person I choose to stand beside for whatever time we are given. Ilara felt tears burning her eyes. Yes, she said simply. To all of it, yes. He kissed her then. Gentle at first, and then fierce, urgent. As if trying to pour everything he felt into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ilara rested her forehead against his. We will survive this, she said again, making it a vow. And we will build something good from what comes after. Dawn arrived too quickly, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale gold. The camp stirred, people checking weapons and taking positions. Miko had chosen their ground carefully, a bottleneck where the forest narrowed, forcing anyone approaching to bunch together. Limiting the effectiveness of superior numbers, they waited as the sun climbed. Tension building until it felt like the air itself might shatter. Then they heard them coming, the sound of many horses, the jingle of tack and weapons. Voices calling back and forth, the land office men appeared. Riding in formation, confident and casual. Expecting no resistance, at their head rode a man in a fine coat with a badge that caught the morning light. He raised his hand and the column stopped. You are trespassing on claimed land, he called out. Though he could not yet see who he was addressing. You have until sundown to clear out. After that, anyone remaining will be removed by force. Miko stepped forward, making himself visible. 36 people behind him doing the same, appearing from the trees and rocks like ghosts. The land office men's casual confidence evaporated, replaced by shock and calculation. This land is not yours to claim, Miko said, his voice carrying clearly. It belongs to the people who have lived here, worked here, bled here. You will not take it without a fight. The man in the fine coat laughed, but it sounded forced. "You think you can stop us," he said. "You are farmers and trappers playing at being soldiers. And you are thieves and murderers playing at being lawmen," Ilara called out. Stepping up beside Miko, "Catherine Brenner is free. She will tell everyone what you did at Cedar Falls. Your crimes will be known." The man's face darkened. "You have made a grave mistake," he said. "The only mistake," Thomas said, moving forward as well, "would be to let you continue destroying lives without consequence." For a long moment, the two groups faced each other, weapons raised, neither side willing to back down. The morning sun climbed higher, birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the forest behind the land office men, came the sound of more horses, many more. Both groups turned to see riders emerging from the trees, dozens of them, wearing the insignias of the Territorial Marshal Service, real law, not hired thugs. At their head rode a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes like flint. She surveyed the scene with obvious displeasure. "Stand down," she ordered, her voice brooking no argument. "All of you, stand down now," Marshal Reeves, the man in the fine coat, said, surprise and something like fear in his voice. "This is not your jurisdiction." "It became my jurisdiction when I received sworn testimony about illegal land seizures and intimidation," Reeves replied. "From a woman named Catherine Brenner, corroborated by witnesses from Cedar Falls. You are under arrest, you and your men." "On what charges?" the man blustered. "Fraud, assault, arson, murder," Reeves listed. "Shall I continue?" The land office men looked at each other, some reaching for weapons. But Reeves's forces outnumbered them 2-1 and looked far more professional. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to dismount and surrender their arms. Miko and his people watched in stunned silence as the men who had terrorized them were taken into custody. Catherine appeared beside Ilara, leaning on Sarah. "I sent a rider to the marshal the day after we got to the settlement," she explained. "I knew testimony alone would not be enough. But I thought if I could buy time, if I could get official law involved." "You saved us," Ilara breathed. "You saved me first," Catherine replied simply. Marshal Reeves approached Miko, studying him with sharp eyes. "Are you the one they call the guardian of the old places?" she asked. "I am Miko," he replied, not quite answering the question. "The territorial governor is reviewing all land claims in this region," Reeves said. "Your testimony will be needed, all of you, to ensure the legitimate claims are protected and the fraudulent ones are dismissed." "And if the governor rules against us?" Miko asked carefully. "Then you will have legal recourse," Reeves said, "and the protection of actual law. Not men pretending to be law while serving their own interests." It was not a perfect answer, not a guarantee, but it was more than they had dared hope for hours before. Miko looked at Ilara, at Daniel, at the 37 people who had chosen to stand with them, and nodded. "We will testify," he said, "and we will trust that justice means something." The land office men were led away in chains. The sun climbed toward midday, and slowly the tension began to drain from the clearing. People embraced, some crying, some laughing, all of them alive and together. Ilara found herself pulled into a dozen different hugs, Catherine holding her the longest, whispering "thank you" over and over. When she finally extracted herself, she looked for Miko and found him standing apart, watching the forest as if still expecting threats. She walked to his side, taking his hand. "It is over," she said gently. "For now," he agreed. "But the fight is never truly over. There will always be someone trying to take what is not theirs. Then we will always be here to stop them," Ilara replied. "Together," he smiled, real and full, transforming his face. "Together," he agreed. The weeks that followed were busy with testimony and paperwork, with rebuilding and planning. The territorial governor ruled in favor. of the established homesteaders and formally recognized the Kato clan to their ancestral lands. It was not everything. It did not undo years of injustice. But it was a start. The settlement grew as others heard what had happened and came seeking a place where standing up for yourself was not just allowed but expected. Daniel stayed, building a cabin near Miko's land. Catherine returned to help establish a school, teaching children to read and write and remember that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. On a clear morning in early spring, Miko and Alara stood before their community and spoke vows. Simple words about choosing each other, about building a life together, about refusing to run from challenges or each other. They held the ceremony near the wagon where they had first met, where Alara had fixed broken wood with frozen hands while rain poured down, where Miko had found a stranger and chosen to see a person worthy of shelter. The wagon was still there, repaired and sturdy, but now it served as a reminder rather than transportation, a symbol of what could be built when people chose connection over isolation, when they chose to fix what was broken rather than abandon it. As the sun set on their wedding day, Alara and Miko walked to the river where they had built the raft that saved Catherine, where they had learned to work together without words, where they had begun to understand that some partnerships were forged not in ease, but in shared struggle. "Do you ever regret it?" Miko asked. "Staying, fighting, all of it." Alara thought about the girl she had been, sleeping in wagons and running from every threat, compared her to the woman she had become, rooted and strong and unafraid. "Not for a single moment," she said. "Even when it was hard," he pressed. "Especially when it was hard," she replied. "Because hard things are the ones worth doing." They stood together as darkness fell and stars emerged. Two people who had chosen each other and chosen this land and chosen to believe that standing for something mattered more than surviving at any cost. And in the years that came after, when others asked Alara about that time, about what made her stay when running would have been easier, she always gave the same answer. "I stopped running," she would say, "the moment someone showed me I was worth standing still for." It was the simple truth, the only truth that mattered, that dignity and home and love were things you chose and fought for and built with your own hands. Day after day, choice after choice, together.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.